180, right on Josh's heels, followed by Saquon, Goff, and far behind, but all of a sudden in the mix, Joe Burrow.
That's not okay.
Oh, he's in the mix.
He's 80-1.
He's
in the mix. He's number 5. I look at him as number 5.
It's not surprising Mahomes hasn't.
We'll get to that, I promise.
Brew, are you buying that Lamar can steal MVP from Josh Allen?
Can I go first on this?
Go ahead.
Sure.
So listen, he definitely can do it. And the voters, it's herd mentality, and it's just gonna, like, the Vegas odds, I think, actually inform the voting sometimes. People don't want to be.
Yeah.
But the question is, should he have a real shot at it? And my answer is the precedent of last season says no. And that's not about Lamar winning 3 or even winning back-to-back. It's that Lamar won last year, and overwhelmingly, 49 of the 50 first-place votes Lamar won. It was not a close race for the reason Josh is going to win this year, which is lower preseason expectations and the feeling that it was a one-man show. That it would not be fair to me if Lamar won it under a certain set of rules last year, and then it's a new set of rules so Lamar can win it this year. And so here's the evidence of that. Last year, here were Lamar's numbers, and here's Josh's numbers this year. Okay, what you're going to see is incredibly similar. 13, 3, 12, and 3. Both around 30 points per game, Josh a little higher. Lamar better completion percentage and yards. Josh way more touchdowns and fewer turnovers. Passer rating about a wash. Okay? So that's how Josh is having the season Lamar had. The argument for Lamar this year is actually the argument for Brock Purdy last year, which we can show you those numbers. Here's Purdy last year, Lamar this year. What you're going to see is, once again, incredibly similar numbers. What hurt Brock Purdy last year was, I think, the fact that his worst game of the year was late, which I think is kind of an unfair standard. But
against the Ravens.
Against the Ravens, but it's not like it's against Lamar's not playing defense. But what hurt Purdy last year was, myself and others were like, man,
now he wants
the key to that offense is Christian McCaffrey. Well, that's what's going to hurt Lamar to a degree this year. We put up Christian McCaffrey and Derrick Henry. What you're going to see is almost identical seasons. And so if the MVPs the last 2 years, if it's going to be logically tracking, would be either Lamar last year, Josh Allen this year, or someone other than Lamar last year, most notably probably Brock Purdy and Lamar this year. But for Lamar to win last year because it's team wins, rising tide, and then Lamar to win this year because adds the most amazing stats, that to me is not, that is in conflict, bro.
Well, I agree with you in that Lamar can catch him. This is really close now. But I disagree on your Purdy argument because, for one, most people never regarded Purdy as the team's best player. Right? It was McCaffrey or even Trent. But, he was not viewed as the team's best player. Lamar is viewed. Even as great as Derrick Henry is, Lamar is their best player. Secondly, Purdy was eliminated essentially by losing the head-to-head with Lamar. Lamar destroyed and outplayed Josh Allen. I know it wasn't one-on-one, but Josh played poorly against the Ravens, and Lamar played well, and they won in a blowout. And Purdy's numbers last year were very good. He led the league in passer rating, but they weren't like historically great like Lamar's are now. And he threw 31 touchdowns last year, Purdy. Dak threw 36. So he had 5 fewer than Dak. And then Dak had 9 interceptions. Purdy had 11. So Purdy's numbers were good, the passer rating especially, but it was like Lamar's numbers are historically great overall because of the few interceptions. And so I just think there's some big differences
Lamar's
there.
Numbers this year, you could argue Joe Burrow has a better statistical season this year than Lamar from just stats, not winning, just stats.
I don't think now Josh even wins. Now it's arguable and it's close, but I don't think he even wins the eye test over Lamar now. Lamar is playing football at a level that is ridiculous. I mean, obviously the running, but the scrambling, yesterday extending those plays and making those throws. I think his scrambling and Derrick Henry get their receivers open, but still he is making great throws. He doesn't have to throw through a lot of tight windows, I don't think. But I look at these numbers compared to Josh. Like I've said, Nick, that if it wasn't for Lamar already winning 2 and winning last year, it wouldn't even be close. The numbers aren't even close. I mean, he's just demolishing Josh in essentially everything. So I do think Josh, I still think he does have the lead in the odds, but he needs to have a great game or two to seal this thing up.
I think that's where things have changed dramatically. It's just like I say, you can lose a job at the end of the season or save a job at the end of the season. I think these awards can go that way as well. And when you look at what Lamar's done against 2 playoff teams, and he got over the hump against the Steelers, that was a big issue. And then he has the game that he has yesterday, and everybody sees it. And then the last thing we saw from Josh is that he's, dueling with the Patriots and Drake May. And so you've got that component.
That's a plus or a minus?
That's a minus, okay? Now, fast forward, and if he lays an egg, or they collectively lay an egg against the Jets, another dog, and then you finish up with the Patriots. So now you've got, whether we like it or not, people are going to look at all the things that Lamar did against these playoff teams versus Josh not playing well against these teams that nobody,
If he lays an egg against the Jets, I would and they lose, and all of a sudden Baltimore's the 2.
Even if they win, I think if he goes out and plays poorly.
But what if he does? Like, remember that game against the Dolphins, where his numbers weren't great at all, but they got out. They almost were too good, so he didn't have to do much at all. So what if that happened?
Josh. Okay, gotcha.
I can see that, but. He set such a high bar with the 30 points a game for 8 straight games, and he's single-handedly, willing the games in some of those situations. But now you got to give Lamar a lot of credit. He overcame some things too this season, with the defense having the poor start.
That's right.
With the offensive line not.
Yeah. So this really is such an interesting conversation at this point for many different reasons, but the biggest reason is that Nick is talking about setting a precedent for MVP and this and that, and this is what happened last year, and therefore that's what needs to happen this year, and this and that. That's just not the way this works. It's just not the way this works. This is a thoughts and feelings award. Nick even said that he thinks that the Vegas odds impact and influence how voters are going to vote, and I totally wholeheartedly see that. The people who vote don't even go and watch every single game. They have their own biases, their own fandom of different players in sports and who they want to see succeed and fail, etc., etc. So that's why, who actually wins the MVP itself kind of just becomes irrelevant. And so many of my conversations about the MVP is based on how I think the people vote, how this thing unfolds. And I absolutely believe that Lamar can steal the MVP from Josh. The biggest argument is always that Josh is doing more with less than Lamar is. Now, this is always the fascinating situation, and this is where we always get in debates with the Kansas City Chiefs and Mahomes. It's like, are you set? Because if Ravens fans push back on that, well, then you're saying that your team is inferior, that you have a worse roster than the Bills. And I just don't think that that's true or accurate. And then it's like, well, no, they're not a worse team because Lamar elevates them. It's this kind of back and forth. And if you don't want to say, do you think that the Chiefs have the better roster than the Ravens? And if the Chiefs don't have the better roster, then was it just that Patrick Mahomes is a better quarterback than Lamar Jackson? Therefore, they were able to win. It's, again, if you want to be consistent with this train of thought and this logic, then you have to apply it to all the situations. You can still make the argument that, yes, Josh Allen is doing more, has to do more for his team than Lamar. but yet Lamar is still playing so unbelievable and so great that he's still more deserving of the MVP. And it is just a weird discussion to kind of continue to have. Because Lamar could be having a greater year and a better year and a more impressive year, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he's the MVP. So it's a weird situation because, again, Derrick Henry's obviously a beast and he's really helping that team. Of course he is. How could he not? Of course he is. Lamar threw like 10 completions yesterday or something the other day. Like, that's a real thing. I think it was like 10. I forget. So, yeah. I mean, it is fascinating because 1 minute, Josh Allen has a couple really extraordinary, spectacular games, and everyone's like, yep, MVP, MVP, MVP. And then he kind of has like one not so great game against the Patriots. And Lamar dominates the Giants and the Texans, who were just going lower, lower, lower. And now everyone's like back on the Lamar train. And understandably so, and rightfully so. Because I do think you're going to say, hey, it's between these two guys. But I think also really you could make the argument that it should be like Joe Burrow. Yeah, they don't have the wins, but Joe Burrow is the only reason why the Bengals are even remotely in this. I mean, like, the dude's got to do everything there as well. I mean, like, he deserves, I mean, especially if he gets the Bengals into the playoffs with that awful defense. And I understand Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but again, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, okay. Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers. Like, you know, like, these guys still will always have someone to rely on. So that's why the more I think about it, the more I watch this conversation unfold throughout the season, the more I think it becomes impossible. If I actually had a vote for MVP, I would have no idea who I was voting for. I really wouldn't. Because if I vote for Josh Allen, it feels like I would be doing wrong to Lamar and even Joe Burrow. If I vote Joe Burrow, it's like, well, how could I not vote Lamar or Josh Allen? Like, I could keep doing it. I could keep doing it. And it's a tough one. I mean, it is. It's a tough one. And yeah, I do think the eye test, like what Brew was saying, the eye test, like Lamar Jackson's probably winning the eye test at this point because he is a human highlight reel. The things he does are spectacular. I think arguably the best play of the season was that play where he did scramble. I already forget exactly how it unfolded, but it was against the Bengals when he had to he literally went backwards like 20 yards, was scrambling, stiff arm someone, and like throws it. I think it was to Zay Flowers for the touchdown, whoever it was, you know. And it was just like, I was like, that was one of the most spectacular things I've ever seen. But again, like that's the difference. Greatness is not necessarily MVP. LeBron has talked about that. Who's the greatest versus who's the most valuable? Like it's, you know, it's a weird situation. I'd love to know someone like LeBron James's honest thoughts. The years that Steph Curry won. I know LeBron thinks that he's the greatest. We know that. And we know he believes he's better than Steph. But would he concede, yeah, Steph was probably more valuable? Or in his heart, is he like, no, Steph was having an unbelievable year, unbelievable season. I'm still the most valuable. Like, I wish we could get, like, real honest conversations with these athletes. Because quite frankly, it's tough. On one side, I think they would know best. On the other side, I think they also need a little space. Sometimes they're too close to it. Like if you ask Tom Brady, who's the most valuable player, it's like, I almost like don't care about his opinion, even though he can obviously evaluate greatness and knows greatness way better than I will. But it's still, you're still too close to it. That's why like a lot of these great players don't always make great coaches or great GMs. We've seen that again and again and again. Because they don't actually really know. They're great players, and they've been around it. They know what it's like to achieve greatness and be around greatness, but they can't always, you know, see the big picture of everything. Because they've had to be so narrow-minded to get where they were. That's why, again, this is one of those things that there's just not actually a right or wrong answer. There's really not. There's really fundamentally not a right or wrong answer. Who's the MVP? Because Josh Allen is the MVP of his team. Lamar Jackson's the MVP of his team. Joe Burrow is the MVP of his team. how do we figure out who's more valuable to their own team? Because if you put Lamar on the Bills and Josh Allen on the Ravens, both these teams would probably be right. So yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about Lamar Jackson stealing the MVP from Josh Allen? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and I absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.